Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, author, leadership, and team development speaker Joe Woodley here with another Key Moments for Faith. Thank you so much for joining me on today's broadcast. Today's topic is, how did we get to this place? How did we get to this place? Before we go any further, make sure you click on the subscription box down at the bottom of the screen, subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, like and share other videos on this channel. Also take a look in the description box where you're certainly sure to find something to help you on this journey we call faith. I really appreciate you guys' support. Again, make sure you share the word about this channel and do not hesitate to subscribe. So my question is, how did we get to this point? And what am I referring to? I'm referring to some of the things that have come out in the media lately about what we see happening with Netflix, with this new documentary or docuseries, whatever it is, called Cuties, that openly and blatantly promotes the sexualization of young girls, little girls. It's an absolute disgrace, but this is happening openly in our society for anyone in the world to take a look at. Perverts all over the world or looking at this show. And so how do we get to the place where this has become so acceptable that Netflix would agree to put this on their platform? How do we get to the place where pedophilia and laws that promote pedophilia are becoming more regularly accepted and promoted by states such as California? You can call it whatever you want to call it. When an older man or an older woman seeks to have a relationship, sexual or otherwise, with a younger person, it's called pedophilia. It's called molestation. It is a disgrace and it is a dishonor before God. But these things are happening more and more on a regular, and we see this spreading around the world. There are places where this readily happens in places around the world, but we see this becoming more acceptable, and people having their mindset, well, what business is it of mine what someone does in their bedroom? That's exactly what the problem is, that this is the natural result of what we saw happening in the 90s, which was the whole tolerance movement, the entire tolerance movement. So we have to understand is that the goal of the enemy is to steal, kill, and to destroy. The goal was never just tolerance. I did a video on this earlier this year where I said the goal was not tolerance, but in promoting these practices. And you have to understand that when we begin to see it whittling away of social norms, of morality, when morality becomes relative and truth becomes relative, and it is whatever that person, the individual person, believes it to be, regardless of what is good or bad, right or wrong, regardless of those things, when we see this beginning to take hold of our society, then we cannot be surprised by what it is that we're seeing, folks. People are scratching their heads. They're looking around and they're having these questions. They're asking these questions. How did we get to this point? I've asked myself that question numerous times as I've seen what has happened in our society and how it has accelerated, particularly over the last 10, 15 years, how this has accelerated. It is the result of our apathy. It is a result of us having an anything goes attitude, and it doesn't matter what someone else does with their life as long as it makes them happy and all this other stuff. This is the natural result of that, folks. This is what happens when we make morality relative to the individual's personal truth, and there is no longer a standard of truth, the standard of truth being based in the Word of God. Then the result is going to be what you're seeing happen now. This is the result. Because if I don't feel that something is evil, even though you may feel that something is evil, in a society that embraces moral relativism, guess what? It doesn't matter what you feel. I'm going to do what I want to do, even though it may be evil, not only in the sight of society, but in the sight of God himself. And so we have a nation full of individuals who conduct themselves and live their lives based on a theory of moral relativism. And so we're seeing the continued slippery slope of the moral decline and degradation of our society. 10, 15 years ago, you would have never seen a series on Netflix called Cuties with this type of activity taking place. You would have never seen that happen. Never. 10, 15 years ago, you would never seen politicians push for laws that promote the practice of child molestation and pedophilia in our society. We would call it abhorrent. We would have sought to take that person out of office or those individuals out of office. We would have called them out. They would have been all over national news. But today, it's a little blip in the radar because in context to all that has occurred in our society over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, it's a blip compared to what's going on. This has all been leading up to this point. And this is why it's so important that as believers, we take a stand. We take a stand in our homes. We take a stand in our communities. We take a stand in our states, in our state legislatures. And yes, we indeed take a stand in this nation, because this is the result of our apathy. This is the result of us sitting back and just saying, hey, whatever makes someone happy, go for it. Who am I to judge? Who am I to question someone else's lifestyle? Who am I to challenge another person's beliefs? Live and let live. Well, that has led us where we are. Because if I allow one perversion to take place and I don't question it, then how can I question another perversion? Because in the sight of God, all sin is equal. You got to understand that. In the sight of God, all sin is equal. Man is the one that sets up different parameters for what is a great evil and what is a not so great evil. What's a big lie and what's a little white lie. Man is the one that sets up those parameters. But in the sight of God, a lie is a lie, the truth is the truth, and that's the end of it. Sin is sin, up is up, down is down. In the eyes of God, that's the way that things are. And so since we have divvied up these things, and this is not so bad. This little white lie right here is not so bad. Well, then if your little white lie is not so bad, then you can't say anything about the big lie. Well, this little act of perversion over here is not so bad. Well, the little act of perversion over here is not so bad, then what stops you from the big acts of perversion? Because what we've done is we've given license and said it is okay. And if you give the enemy any room whatsoever, he's taken the entire territory. If you give him an inch, he's taken the entire territory. I remember years ago, my grandmother made this statement, and I'll never forget it. I'm getting ready to close out, guys, but she made this statement about society and about relationships. And I was a teenager, and so I didn't quite get it because, I didn't know about life. And she says to me, JoJo, don't ever compromise. I was like, what? Grandma, you have to. That's the way she said, no. Let me tell you something, baby. You compromise one part of the word, you're going to compromise the entire thing. Listen to me. You compromise one part of the word, you're going to compromise the entire thing. And I just looked at her and said, well, people got to get along and this and the other. And she said, I'm just telling you about life. If you have a standard, hold that standard. Stand on that standard. Let it be true, whether people are watching you or not, whether you're in the house or out of the house, doesn't matter. Let that standard be true. And I was like, okay, Grandma, okay, I hear you. And what I've seen happen, and what many of you have seen happen who are old enough, is you have seen the complete meltdown, the breaking down of our society. You see churches allowing things to happen in them that you would have never seen happen 20, 30 years ago. So we may say that it's in the name of progress, but what we're doing is we're actually regressing away from God. We're regressing away from the things of God, the ways of God, the thoughts of God. We're regressing from those things. The morality of God, the character of God, the integrity of God. We have regressed away from those things. Even in many of our churches, we license and we ordain people who are not fit to lead, who don't have the moral proclivity to be leaders, who are going to judge as God would have them to judge, who are going to live as God would have them to live. So we put these people in positions of authority, and then we're shocked when we see disarray in our churches. We vote for people and put people in office who are morally and spiritually compromised. Don't let me hear anything else about, separation of church and state. The fact of the matter is, if you are a believer, of any person of any faith, the fact of the matter is, no matter where you go in the world, people always put people in office that have their points of view about various issues. Your faith informs you. So I'm always worrisome when I hear politicians get up and say, well, you know what? My personal faith is private, and how I'm going to govern is going to be different than how I feel. That's a lie. If your personal faith is that important to you, you cannot distinguish or differentiate between the two. Now, you may be able to govern people fairly. You can still govern people fairly and in a godly way, because God is a fair God. He's a God of truth. He's a God of justice. So you'll be able to do things, but to simply get up and say, well, my faith is separate, and it doesn't really matter what I believe. It does matter what you believe. And so we put people in office who promote perversion and perverse lifestyles and perverse theologies, and we're shocked. We send our kids to schools with professors who promote perversion and perverse theologies and perverse doctrines, and we're shocked. We allow perversion to come onto our television sets when we every show has to have some type of perverse activity taking place on it. Our children grow up watching this. We watch it. We become desensitized, and we're shocked. This is the natural reaction. This is the consequence of us compromising our faith. This is the consequence of us not standing for truth. And now we have to try and play catch up, because all of this stuff is happening right in front of us. People are freaking out when they should have been freaking out about the small activities. When they should have been freaking out about the stuff that most of society says doesn't really matter. Because it's the little things that we say that don't matter that add up to the huge things that do matter. All those little steps add up to the big things. And now we've got a Cuties. Now we've got pedophilia being promoted. And you know why they're doing that? To protect a lot of those individuals who are in positions of power, who are participating in those activities. So they want to protect them because they put a lot of money into it, but they live perverse lifestyles. So they want to make sure that they're protecting those individuals. So we see all this stuff happening. We see perversion on our television set. We see perversion in our movie theaters. We see perversion in our store. All of this stuff is occurring because we refused to take a stand in the very beginning. And we kept giving ground in the name of tolerance. And now this is where we are. This is how we got to this point. The Bible makes it very clear that you cannot tolerate those little things, because they will add up to the big things. So my prayer for you guys today, as you are freaking out over Cuties, you're freaking out over all these other things, my prayer for you is that you would begin to take a stand and say, as for me and my house, I don't know what y'all doing over there, but for this house, we will not allow this stuff to take place in here. We are not supporting, nor are we promoting any perversion in our homes, lest it lead until all those other things, all those other spiritual attacks, all those other psychological ailments and social ailments taking hold in our homes. We're not going to let this stuff go down. We're not. People can call me a prude. People can call me tight. They can call me all the stuff. But as for me and my house, we're not doing it. We are not doing it. And so I'm challenging you guys to take a stand. I know that we are behind the ball because we let this go on for so long. We're behind the ball. But in your home, you can take a stand And you can get some other people in their homes to take a stand. And some of you whose churches may be a little bit waffly, you can get your church to take a stand. You can get your community to take a stand. And we can stand up to this and say, for Christ we live, for Christ we die. We will not allow this to happen in our community and in our nation. We are not going to sit idly by anymore and be apathetic to what's going on in our society.